Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Renee Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Taylor Elise Morrison. Taylor and I are going to be talking on the topic of practicing self-care and feeling at home in your body. How many of you know that that's important? So welcome, Taylor.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thank you for being on the show and for sharing your expertise on self-care. All right, so let me give you guys a brief introduction to Taylor. Taylor Elise Morrison turned bad at self-care and being firmly convinced of every human's potential into a career. She is the founder of the media company Inner Workout and the author of a book by the same name. Recently named one of Fortune's 10 innovators shaping the future of health. Taylor is tired of aspirational wellness. Instead, she builds businesses, content, and experiences that make well-being and personal development more accessible. You're just as likely to see Taylor facilitating a workshop at a Fortune 100 company as you are to see her talking about TikTok and body image with a high school class. Wherever she goes, Taylor's sure to use her coaching, mindfulness, and movement training to meet people where they're at and offer actionable steps towards creating a world without burnout. Yes, that's awesome. When you practice self-care, then you should be creating your inner world without burnout. So Taylor, it's an interesting niche. Can you tell me how you got on the self-care path? In your bio, you start off by saying that you were once bad with self-care. So how did you go from that to be an author of the book, The Inner Workout?
Yeah. And I would still say doing self-care, practicing self-care isn't something that comes naturally to me. I always like to be upfront about that because I think it's really easy to see someone who's written a book or talks about a topic and be like, well, they're so far ahead. It could never possibly be me. And I really came into this work because I needed it. I was in a place where I was working full time. I had a business on the side. I was volunteering with multiple nonprofits. I was planning a wedding. I was trying to have a social life. And I kept feeling overwhelmed and burned out. And I was approaching self-care the way that I had seen it approached in a lot of spaces in the mainstream, but I wasn't necessarily feeling cared for in my daily life. In fact, I kept going back to this place of feeling burned out and overwhelmed. And so really through my own journey of figuring out what it looked like to actually feel cared for, that led me to this work of Inner Workout. And now I feel like it keeps me honest. Like I'm not perfect at it, but I have tools I can continue to use.
Okay. So how are we using the word self-care? What is your definition of it? And when you use that label, what are you meaning?
Yeah, the definition that we use both in the book and in the company Inner Workout is that self-care is listening within and responding in the most loving way possible. So it really shifts self-care from an item on your to-do list to a continuous conversation that you're having with yourself.
Okay, I get it. So what were you bad at? You said that you were pretty bad with self-care and you still struggle with it. So are you bad with the conversation with yourself? Or are you bad with scheduling it? Are you bad with, a list? Or give us an example of someone that's listening so that they can identify with what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, if we bring it back to that definition of self-care as listening within and responding in the most loving way possible, I've struggled with both pieces of that equation, and the people that I work with tend to struggle with one or both of those pieces. So in the beginning, a lot of it was the listening within, understanding what's going on for me beneath the surface, not what people are telling me to care about, not what is the trendy topic, but listening to me, being connected to my own inner voice, my own inner wisdom. So that's one part of the equation. The other piece is responding with love. So it's one thing to understand I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I feel anxious in these situations, or I'm doing this thing that I no longer feel aligned or connected to. It's quite another to respond by having a conversation, or by reprioritizing how you're spending your time, or by making an adjustment. So a lot of people need to start their journey with learning how to listen within. But then it gets into the, okay, loving response. How can I use the time, the resources available to me to give myself whatever it is that I need?
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm glad I dug a little deeper, because yeah, we need to put the, the proper label on what we're talking, because anybody that's listening, when they say self-care, you might think, okay, all right, so I'm going to schedule time to maybe go to the gym, or for meditation, or for, going and get my nails and my a pedicure. And instead of caring for others, you're caring for yourself. You're scheduling time to care for yourself. But what your work seemed to be focused on, and that's basically why you wrote the book, and then you have the company, the inner workout. You're talking about the inner self-care, where if, let's say, I always like to dig deep so people can actually grab it. So let's say that, like you just talked about, you were you were working, let's say 9 to 5. It doesn't mean 9 to 5, but let's say you're working 9 to 5. Let's say that you got a side hustle, a business on the side. You're volunteering at nonprofit, so that maybe you can help your business on the side, or your career, because that's your focus. And then you're saying you're planning a wedding. So you are burning out, and you have to care for yourself, to say, hey, maybe I need to cut out some things out of this, or so that's where we're going with this conversation.
Um, that was part of it. And I think so. One of the themes that we talk about is these 5 dimensions of well-being: physical, energetic, mental and emotional, wisdom, and bliss. So when I'm talking about self-care and doing the inner work, some of that, yes, is having conversations with yourself, doing more, doing less, things that are really internal that no one else notices. But then some of those are external things. Like for me, every morning, it's a non-negotiable for me that I move my body, but I'm not overly prescriptive of what that looks like. So this morning, I had a late night last night. I had to take a family member to the emergency room. And so this morning, when I checked in and said, okay, what do I need in terms of movement this morning? It was to walk for 20 minutes on my treadmill. Tomorrow, I might ask myself that same question, and it might be that I do yoga or I do cardio boxing. So what my work around self-care is really trying to do is to get you to the point where you are stepping in to your own self-expertise. You're really understanding what you need, and you're willing and able to give it to yourself to the best of your abilities, using the resources that you have. A lot of times when I see people approaching self-care, it's very, I read a study or I read an article that said meditation is good and you should meditate for 20 minutes. So I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes and I have to do it that way, instead of viewing it as, okay, I got some new information. Meditation might be something that's good for me. Let me try it out. Let me understand what feels good, what feels difficult. What are different types of meditation that I can try? So again, it's less about, I need to do this thing. I need to schedule this thing, a lot of times at a very surface level, and more about being in conversation with yourself and acknowledging that you are a human who is a part of nature, who is going to shift and change. So as you continue to have that conversation with yourself, the ways that you care for yourself may shift and change over time, will shift and change over time.
I love that. I love that. Yes. I love when I dig deep. It's the coach in me. All right. Well, you touched on a couple of things just now. So since it's been introduced, let's go there. So you said that self-care, there's 5 models. or 5 parts of it, or is it wellness? I'm not sure which one you called it, but you said, so let's go over those 5 things again.
Yeah, so there's 5 dimensions of well-being that
Well-being.
are really fundamental to the work of Inner Workout as a company and fundamental to the book. That's a lot of the structure of the book, is reviewing these 5 dimensions, and then there's 14 subdimensions. So I was first introduced to the concept that inspired the 5 dimensions of well-being when I was going through my yoga teacher training, and I was introduced to this yogic concept of the koshas that eventually inspired the 5 dimensions of well-being. So when we're talking about these dimensions, it really gives language and reminds us that there are multiple pieces and facets of us. Another thing that I see really regularly when people are talking about self-care in the mainstream is that it tends to be pretty surface level, and it tends to primarily focus on our physical body. When we're talking about, like the examples you gave, doing your nails or getting your hair done or getting a massage, all lovely things that I enjoy, but there's so many other aspects of me. And that's where the dimensions of well-being can be useful, because if you're getting your nails done, but in reality, the care that you need is around being connected to community, getting your nails done isn't getting you to the root of the issue. So to go over those 5 dimensions, there's the physical dimension, which looks at the conversation you're having with your body. So are you able to understand what your body is saying to you? And what are you saying to your body? Are you speaking to it kindly? Are you treating it as a partner, or are you treating it as this thing that's external to you that you have to like put into submission? Then there's the energetic dimension that looks at your ability to support yourself through and support your well-being through your breath. And then also looks at the way that energy moves throughout your daily life. The example I often give is, we've all had the experience where we have a conversation and we're so energized after that conversation. It like gave us energy. We've also had the experience, I'm guessing, I've definitely had this experience where I leave a conversation afterwards and I'm just feeling so drained.
Yeah.
That's happening all the time.
Negative energy from the other person. Very few of us get the opposite one. They get that one.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's just one example of the ways that we are giving and receiving and exchanging energy throughout our daily lives. Then there's the mental and emotional subdimension, which looks at the way that we are using our brains, the way that we're able to process and express our emotions. And that's supported by the foundation of sleep, because sleep doesn't just affect our physical bodies. It also literally affects our ability to think and to process and to verbalize. Then there's the wisdom dimension, which is about connecting to our inner wisdom in the present moment and taking aligned action on those insights. Similar to what I was saying when I was talking about the definition of self-care is listening within and responding with love. Sometimes we can hear from our inner voice. We have that gut feeling, or we have that feeling in our heart. And we're like, we have a sense of what we should do or what we shouldn't do. That's one thing to have that sense. It's another thing to take aligned action on that. And then the final dimension of well-being is about bliss, which is a state of connection to the truest, the fullest expression of yourself, connection to community, and connection to something bigger than you, however you define that connection. So those are the 5 dimensions of well-being, and I touched briefly on some of the subdimensions. And so when we're looking at care, this model really helps you holistically pinpoint what part of me might be needing care right now.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. So yeah, you tapped into the full holistic approach of how someone not only can be self-care, but in order for you to be fulfilled and happy, to be quite honest. Because a lot of people feel that they only have to touch on maybe the career goals or something, but you've touched in all the different aspects that make us humans. And It's excellent that we're putting it into self-care, but I can see why your book is called The Inner Workout, because you're actually touching on what it is to be a fulfilled being, right? And not just, someone that just responds to whatever is going on in the world, but actually working on your human system, your human body, and energetically, emotionally, listening and all that. So, and obviously you got that piece from yoga, which is, we all think that, not we all, you wouldn't, but most people in the Western world think of yoga as just doing some poses. But I follow Sadhguru, and I follow a lot of the luminaries like Deepak Chopra and all that. And yoga is actually connection. It's not just the poses. So I'm pretty sure that's where you're getting that piece from. You're integrating the inner workout to all these different dimensions. So that's beautiful. And obviously, hey, if you guys want to know more and get deeper into that, then you pick up a copy of Taylor's book. All right. So one of the other things that you talk about is feeling at home in your body. So how does that fit into these dimensions?
Oh, so many places. So the most obvious place is to look to the physical dimension and be like, okay, physical body, physical dimension. And what I find is that like our relationship to our body really spills over into all of the dimensions of well-being. There are so many places, and in many ways that would seem harmless, where we're kind of taught not to listen to our bodies. I was interviewing a guest for my podcast yesterday, and she was talking about, she does a lot of work with parents, a lot of work and research around parents. And she was talking about how common it is for parents to be like, you just got to have one more bite, even if their kid is like stuffed. And she talked about her experience as a kid where she was like, I physically felt like I could not put anything else into my stomach. But my grandma was like, you got to drink some of this milk first. Or as an adult, I can see in my life where I'm like, I need to go to the bathroom. I feel that I need to go to the bathroom, but I just got to get one more email done. And then I can go to the bathroom. I'm conditioning myself to ignore my body. And so part of the work, part of our inner work is, one, being able to notice what our body is saying, simple cues like I'm hungry, I'm full, I'm tired, I need to go to the bathroom. But then also being able to honor those needs. And I joked about this a few years ago, but I was like, a big part of my inner work is actually being willing to say, you know what? I can take a minute, run to the restroom for a bio break, and then come back and do this later. That is me practicing honoring my body.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece is around when we start to build that connection to our bodies have so much wisdom. One of my favorite books that I read this year was The Extended Mind, and it was talking all about how, especially in the West, and I love that you brought this up, we very much like to think that all of the magic happens in our brain. We can just think our way through everything, which is, our brains are powerful, and our bodies have so much wisdom and allow us to experience the world and learn from the world in a much more integrated way. So when we are physically in our bodies, instead of thinking that our bodies are just these things that hold our brain, all of a sudden we have new ideas, deeper experience, more happiness, because we're present in the world instead of just kind of trying to rush through it and think through it.
Yes. That's pretty good. Right. Yeah. I listen to a lot of for some reason luminaries is in my brain, so I'm going to use that.
I love that word,
Dr.
though.
Joe, I know Dr. Joe Dispenza, Eckhart Tolle, all these people are talking about, getting the mind out of the body, because people think that you're right, the mind is in the head or wherever it is. Deepak Chopra says it's not in the body, but people seem to think that it's in the brain, right? But the mind is also in the body. And according to Deepak Chopra, everybody wants to be enlightened and they want to go in this world, but he says the body is the doorway. Yeah, you've got to go through the body. So yes, I'm glad that you're saying to pay attention to what the body is saying. But as you were talking, and I'm actually going to bring this up because I want to hear the answer to it. But let's say that you have pain in the body and your non-negotiable is movement. Because I go through that once in a while. And my knee might be hurting or something, and my non-negotiable is movement. So I still go to the gym and I still walk. So, but that's not listening to my body. What's your answer to that?
Yeah, this actually comes up for me. I grew up doing ballet, and my knees have been bad like since I was a teenager, just because of how much wear I was putting on my knees at that point in my life. And something that I'm noticing in my life is the human tendency. We love all or nothing thinking, or either or thinking. And really, most often, the answer is this nuance, this in between. And so, what I find as someone who really needs movement I don't even think about it as much for my physical health, more for like my mental health and overall well being.
Mm-hmm.
That goes back to the listening within and responding with love. Like, if I'm not feeling well, I can still do, even if I hurt my ankle, I can do some seated stretches and be in my body.
Okay.
Or I can do some like gentle chair movement and be in my body. So even when and that's like the most extreme. I'm thinking of like when I sprained my ankle for a few years ago. That's the most extreme. I still have an ability to move my body or to be in my body. The other thing that I would say, and this is another piece of that is an active care and is part of my inner work, is being willing to modify. If I am doing a more like regimented practice, or I'm following along to a class, noticing, ooh, this doesn't feel great in my knee. So instead of doing full on jumping jacks, I've got to take it one leg at a time. So there are ways that we can move and still actually be practicing listening within and responding with love.
Yes. Okay. Right. Yeah. I just threw that in there because I wanted to hear, but because yes, I don't listen to it at all. I still go walk. Because to me, it is very important for me, whether you're right, whether it's for my mental health, it's for my physical health, for my longevity. Movement is there for me for a reason. And as you get older, which I'm way older than you, as you get older, you are going to have aches and pains. So you just got to push through them. But yeah, I'm glad. I hear what you say in modify, because I have, when I started doing my morning workout, I would jog, and I can't do that no more. So so I have modified it. Right, yeah. So awesome. All right. So now you also say in your work that self-expertise is now the new self-care. How are we pairing those?
Yeah. And when I compare self-expertise to self-care, I mean like in a buzzword sense. Like, I would love if in a couple of years everyone was talking about self-expertise, because honestly, as someone who writes about self-care, talks about self-care, I spend a lot of time being like, no, wait, this is what I actually mean about self-care. And this is where I think self-care can lead us. And the most frequent feedback that I get is, wow, the way that you talk about self-care is so much more expansive than what I was thinking when I thought about self-care. So in terms of self-expertise, this is something that I harp on all the time with the inner workout community, is that you are your own best expert. And what I see for people who are interested in self-help, who are interested in wellness, who are interested in well-being, is that so often and I can speak from the I here, I take my tendency to want to be an overachiever and want to be quote unquote good and want to be accepted, and transfer all of that into the work that I'm doing around personal development and care. And so I can see someone who's doing a workout plan, or I can hear someone who's talking about a specific type of meditation and be like, oh, they must know better than me, which is not true. They might have great subject matter expertise on movement or meditation, but they have never been you. And you have never been you at this particular moment, at this particular season in your life. And that's why I I feel so passionate about the way that I talk about self-care as listening, responding, having this conversation with yourself. Because the more you know yourself, the more that you can feel grounded in your expertise, and you can tap into all of the wonderful resources and luminaries, to use your words, that we have access to, and then be able to learn from Deepak Chopra, or to learn from this person, and then integrate it into you, rather than you trying to change completely who you are to fit into someone else's mold.
I like that. That goes part of the listening, inner listening and responding. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so what you're saying is that as you practice self-care and listening, then you're going to have self-expertise knowledge in certain areas. I like that. I like that. I like that. So you're awesome. Awesome. All right. So yeah, you're also an entrepreneur. We talked about your side hustle, and you are the founder of what's it called again? The
Inner workout.
Inner workout. I was looking for it here on your bio. But yeah, so let's talk about self-care now, when you're an entrepreneur. Because when you're an entrepreneur, I started my entrepreneurial journey as a limousine operator,
Wow.
years ago in Canada. And it was like a 24-hour job. People will call you at 4 a.m. They want to go to the airport and stuff like that. So a lot of entrepreneurs don't have time for the physical self-care, much less the mental and emotional self-care. So how do you teach your inner workout community? I like the way how you label it, to practice self-care when they're entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And I would actually push back on that we don't have time for self-care, because what I find often is that when people say they don't have time for self-care, I mean, there's so many different angles that we could take this, but a lot of times, and the people that I'm working with tend to be, again, this person who is the strong friend, is there for everyone else, is this overachiever. They feel like they don't have enough time to do self-care, quote unquote, the right way.
Well,
And
that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the time thing, because entrepreneurs wear all hats. So that's basically where I'm going with that, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what I would say to that is that there is time for you to do something for yourself. So the starting point that I often give people is to find a point of time. And for me, for example, it's often when I'm walking my dog. Our first walk of the day is time for me to be with my thoughts, time for me to listen within. So find those pockets of time. And to start, it may be a minute in between calls, or it may be you're in the car on the way to your next client meeting and you take some time to check in. But what I would really encourage for entrepreneurs is to start noticing the pockets of time that you have, using them to do something, even if it's just like, what do I need? I need 3 deep breaths. I need to say 3 things that I'm grateful for. I need to just stand up and stretch really quick because I've been sitting.
Mm-hmm.
So noticing those pockets of time, using them, and then celebrating whatever care you're able to give to yourself. That's another thing, is that a lot of times when we talk about I don't have time for self-care, we're kind of saying, oh, well, if I do 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute of self-care, that's not enough. That doesn't count.
Right.
I would encourage you to challenge that and say, you know what? I did find a couple minutes to care for myself today. That is amazing. I'm proud of myself for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's good. I love the because you're right. You do have time. Even if you have to get up earlier, right? You actually do have time. And if you make it a non-negotiable, you will have time. But a lot of people, you use the word, the label, the overachievers, they're always thinking of the next thing that they have to do and the next place they have to go and where the business needs to be. And because their mind is so full of all the things that they want to do, they never take time to, like you said, check in or stretch or you know, meditate. Right. You know, when I first started listening to Deepak, he talked about meditating for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening. And people saying, you're right, I don't got 30 minutes. But then I listened to someone else and it says that if you don't meditate, you don't start with 30 minutes, you start with a minute.
Exactly. And that's the problem with overachievers is we're like,
Yes.
oh, I got to get to that person, to the same place where that person is. And that person's probably been doing it for 10 years, for 5 years. You
Yes.
got to start with where you are and what you
Yes.
have.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
maybe it expands into 30 minutes, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe
Right.
you find that 10 minutes
Right.
is enough for you.
Yeah. Mel Robbins, when I listened to her book, she talked about 5 minutes in the morning before you get up out of bed. And she's built a career on those 5 minutes. 5 minutes, you know, before you get out of bed. And it's big, you know, because she was one of those people that never want to get up out of bed and she kept snoozing and snoozing and snoozing. And then she started with the 5 minutes and yeah. But yes, five, you know, I would say more than a minute, but 5 minutes, everybody's got 5 minutes. And yeah, I love the part about in the car because that's why podcasts are so big now. Because people are listening in the car, people are listening to it when they're walking their dog, they're at the gym, and it's self-care because you're learning something. You know, you're getting nuggets of how maybe you can make your life better, right? Or you're getting, you know, I listen to podcasts too. I read books, I get inspiration. So yes, it's you know, little pockets of time, and then yeah, and then maybe even now I still don't, you know, sit and meditate at night. I mean, but yeah, I mean, the perfect thing is do it in the morning and do it at night. But you know, I meditate in the morning. So yes, you know, you find the time, but now I can find all kinds of times because I work for myself. But you know, when I was that, you know, limousine operator, I had, you know, I doubt I had any time for self-care because I certainly didn't walk. I certainly didn't meditate. That was way back in another life before my personal development journey. But, you know, I did take time to maybe for entertainment. And I guess that was my self-care, you know, going out for dinner, going out dancing, that kind of thing. That was my
Yeah.
self-care back then. So yeah, I'm glad that we're expanding the topic on self-care, which is great, which is basically what your work is. All right. So tell us what inspired you to write the book, The Inner Workout, and what do you really want readers to walk away with after reading your book?
Yeah, this book, I've joked that this is like my dissertation on self-care. I've been talking about self-care for like at least 5 years, I think, at this point. And I have done workshops and keynotes and different things, led courses in my own community, but this is the first place where everything could come into one place. And I love my editor. When she reached out to me about writing this book, she was like, I picture this really beautiful book that people could have on their nightstand. And if they turned to any page, there'd be something that was useful for them. And that
Yeah.
was really the vision that we held. And something that someone else that I've worked with before mentioned about books that I hadn't thought of is that it's also a way to make my work more accessible. Not everyone can afford coaching. Not everyone can afford to go through a course or a workshop, but the book is in libraries. The book is only like $20. And that's
Right.
a lot more affordable way to begin this work for yourself than
Yes.
some of the other offerings. So it's also a way to like make my work more accessible to more people. Um, and then what I want people to get out of it is I keep going back to the feedback that like I love that lights me up when people are like, "Oh, I never thought of self-care this way." I
Right.
felt like Taylor was talking to me and I felt like I could actually do this. Like my whole thing is that for so long, when we talk about wellness, when we talk about well-being, when we talk about personal development, it's always like you need to become someone else. You need to move over there. And my
Mhm.
whole thing is no, let's start with where you are. Let's be
Mhm.
really honest about what's accessible to you and let's see how we can make you feel the most cared for given where you are at. So if people see themselves in this book and feel like there is at least one thing, and I promise there will be way more than one thing that they can get out of
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
then
You have
I've done
14
my job.
subdimensions.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
Yeah, good. Mhm.
So yeah, I and the book really expands on this resource that is free and will remain free called the Take Care Assessment that measures our well-being across the 5 dimensions and the 14 subdimensions. And then it gives you this PDF report based on your results and gives you sample practices to get started. So the book really encourages you to take the assessment to start and then you can read it like a choose your own adventure and be like, ooh, I need some work on the embodiment subdimension of the physical dimension. Let's flip over to that chapter and see what I can work on.
I love it. I love it. It almost sounds like my when I started coaching, I used to incorporating something that's called a life wheel. And when you first start talking about the dimensions, which is basically now I actually made the connection to that what I was thinking. But yeah, in order for us to be fulfilled in this world, you in this lifetime, then you there's 5 areas that you need to work on. So when someone comes into coaching, I would say, between 1 and 10, how good are you with your interpersonal connections, or how good with you with your career, or those type of things, spirituality, and yeah. So that's basically, so you've gone deeper, right? And so that's great, but it's the same general concept, is that you can be at a 10 in your career but a 0 in spirituality, and you're not going to be happy, right? So here what you're doing is bringing it to self-care, and the purpose would be for you to feel complete and loving, and all the things. We didn't touch on that, but yeah, maybe answer that. What's the end result of self-care? I know our topic today is feeling more at home in your body, but um, what is the end result that you tell your clients that will get once they practice these 5 dimensions?
Yeah, the goal is that they are more, I'll say that I want to support people in knowing, caring for, and becoming their whole self. So you know yourself deeply, you feel cared for, and you are becoming this version of you. You're not changing who you are, but you're really stepping into who you already were. And it's a process. Like, I don't think any of us ever fully gets there because whenever we get to a place where there's some sort of balance or stasis, maybe, then something might change within us.
Yes.
Something might change in our external environment. And then we got to figure out, okay, what does it look like to care for myself given these new realities?
Yes, I like that. Yeah, there's always change. Once you're alive, there's always going to be change. There's always going to be things that's different, and we have to be able to have the inner fortitude to flow with it and not resist it. Awesome, awesome. Right. Yes. Well, hey, one of the reasons I like doing this work is that I learn something new every week when I sit and I talk to guests. And you're right, you have expanded, because I came in thinking of the physical self-care. And I'm leaving thinking about the self-care for your inner workout, your inner being. So it's amazing. All right, so tell our listeners and those watching on TV how they can get a copy of your book, your website, your social media handles so they can follow you.
Yeah. So if you head to innerworkout.co, there's a button right there that will show you all the places you can get the book. It also, there's also a button right below it that links you to the Take Care assessment. So if you go to our website, top 2 resources are right there. And I'm not super active on social media, but I always say I'm kind of on Instagram at Taylor Elise Morrison. That's Elise with a Y. And then Inner Workout is kind of on Instagram at Inner Workout. But honestly, the best way to stay connected with us is through our Self-Care Sundays newsletter and by listening to the Inner Warm Up podcast.
All right. Yes, you mentioned that. I did not know that you have a podcast. So your podcast is called Inner Workout?
It's called Inner Warm Up.
Inner Warm Up. Okay.
Yeah. The idea is it's where your inner work begins. So we're getting you warmed up.
Awesome. Right. Yes. I actually did notice that you're on Instagram as 2 different people, and I think I follow you both.
Yeah, we got the company
yes.
one and then the me one.
Yes, yeah, I saw that. Right. Yes, I saw that. Okay, awesome. All right. So listen, thank you, Taylor. This has been a, illuminating conversation. Thank you so much for bringing your passion about self-care. And now we've got self-expertise to my listening audience. So there will be a transcript of my conversation with Taylor on the show page, which is blog.myhelps.us. And in there, I will link out to her website. I'll link out to her 2 social media handles. And so just go, go connect with her and, allow her to expand your mind on consciousness. And of course, I'll link out to her book, like she said, that is a very inexpensive resource for you to get started. So that you can, you can learn about the 5 dimensions of well-being and the 14 sub-dimensions, because yes, I believe that that's very important. I mean, I live it. I will tell you that if you're only touching on one dimension, then you're not going to be fulfilled. You have to touch on them all. A little bit, even if you're not at a 10, if you're at least touching them all and working on them and being aware of them, then you'll have a much better life and feel at home in your body. So thank you, Taylor. As we wrap up, any last words?
No, just thank you so much for your time and for this conversation.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. And I remember you talking in the beginning about conversations that light you up. Almost every time I sit in this chair and I have a conversation with somebody, it lights me up. It's amazing because I learned something. I mean, there's not one person I've talked to that I'm bored. And this is one of them. So thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you so much for this illuminating conversation and, putting a light on self-care. So good luck with your podcast as well. I will link out to your podcast, the Inner Warm Up podcast. And, hopefully you get some more listeners from here. All right. All right. Well, listen, guys. Thank you for tuning in to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. If you're listening on iTunes, I would love for you to rate and review. If you're watching this on YouTube, I would love for you to subscribe. And see you right back here next week for another episode of Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life. Until then, namaste.